Season 2 has hit everyone's rank like a freaking truck. With the giant D rank and the change in the rank system, many players are struggling more now than ever. But in this video, I'm going to give you advice on how to climb from every single rank, because there is different tips you need to use if you're in bronze and silver versus being in diamond and grandmaster. So we're going to break it all down. But if you want more targeted help, 30 days of free coaching, check it out right now in the description. And I stream Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Follow my stream and come say hi. I'm trying to get partner and I would appreciate it. Let's jump in. Now, first we're going to talk about bronze, and this actually applies all low ranks. The lower in rank you are, the more this advice will apply, and it's guaranteed to get you out of bronze. In bronze rank, the game is literally a death match. I see way too many players trying to play the game of a hero shooter where they're taking space, enabling their DPS, healing everybody up, and really this is not what's going to climb you out of bronze. The problem is, the lower in rank you are, players are constantly staggering, no one's helping each other or on the same page at all, and the reality of it is you can't rely on anyone. So how do you actually climb? It's simple. You kill things and you don't die. I want you to overly simplify the game and make it like it's a deathmatch, because that's essentially what it is. And you can do this from every single role. Whether you're tank, rocking a Thor, you go in, you drop down on enemy supports, you bubble them off and you kill them. You fly away, you go get a health pack, then you come on back and kill someone else. You're getting value without the need and resources of your team, and you're still living. Whether you're playing a support like Mantis, running around actually confirming kills, sleeping divers with a really forgiving sleep and punishing them for it, or playing DPS that are self-sufficient and don't require you to constantly be pocketed. If you're playing Iron Man and you're screaming at your team to constantly look up and heal you, and they're incapable of doing so, you are going to be slamming your head into a wall. I'm telling you right now, you need to play in a way that enables yourself, relying mostly on health packs or just a lack of a need to be constantly pocketed and enabled. The less you require from your team to give value, the better. And it's so extreme to the point where there is certain heroes that I wouldn't even recommend playing in the lowest of elos. Like if you're really trying to work with your team and you're playing like Magneto, for example, I don't think you should play a traditional Magneto in low elo, if Magneto at all. If you're gonna play Magneto, you need to be far more aggressive and even play untraditional aggressive angles. Focus less about you taking space and enabling your team and more about you getting kills, using your abilities really selfishly and trying to leverage the fact that you can shield off enemy DPS and burst them down really hard with your alternate fire. But really, I would not even really recommend Magneto in low elo at all, even though he's dominant in high elo, because he's a character that plays the game of a hero shooter incredibly well, but not necessarily the character that plays the game of a deathmatch very well. And I know that this is a weird concept, but I promise you, the higher in rank you climb, and really quickly after you climb out of bronze and even silver, you'll be able to play a real hero shooter, like the real game. But until then, I want you to not focus on a lot of these advanced tips and tricks and things that are gonna really be, you know, slamming your head into the wall, trying to do something that no one else wants to be along for the ride with. Is just gonna make you frustrated. So self-sufficiency, high kills, low deaths, I promise you this will get you out of bronze. Now moving up to silver, it's gonna be more of the same thing. There is still that deathmatch nature of silver. However, things are definitely taking a big step up from bronze, and there's a lot more people stuck in silver than there are stuck in bronze. So let's talk about why the players are stuck in this rank and what are some things you can do to get out. Once again, you need to focus on being impactful without teammates. I think a lot of people like to look outward a lot in silver. They say, my supports are not healing me, my tanks aren't taking space, they're just sitting around, my DPS are never getting picks. And here's the reality that you need to accept. You don't deserve good teammates until you climb to the rank that those players are in. So if you had good teammates that did all the things that you want, they would not be in silver. They would be in a higher rank. And understanding that means that you need to try to do more with less. You need to try to be more impactful with less resources. And that's really how you are tested in silver, not with what you can accomplish when your team fully pocket you and do everything you want them to do. It's when no one is doing anything that you want or giving you anything that you want. How are you performing in that environment? Of course, there's going to be some characters that are going to be able to do this easier, but understand that it's not about yelling at your teammates or screaming that I need this or need that. It's about trying to find ways to still be impactful individually, even in spite of what your teammates are or aren't doing. Now, there is an easy cheat code here, and it just comes down to not soloing. If you are duoing with a partner that both of y'all are enabling each other, this is going to be better than just playing with a whole bunch of randoms. And I do think that, especially in the lower ranks like silver, having at least one person that is on the same page as you and is helping you accomplish what y'all both want to do, both of y'all being on the same page, is going to be a really big thing. And I think that getting a duo can be just fantastic, not only for your rank, but also for your sanity. Now, on an individualistic point of view, I want you to not waste your abilities. I've VOD reviewed quite a few silver players. We actually do VOD reviews sometimes on the channel. Definitely follow down below so you don't miss out on the VOD review streams. But I see a lot of wasting of abilities. This is true no matter what role. Like, I see Magneto's wasting a lot of bubbles. I see Adam Warlocks and Loki's wasting totems and soul bonds. I see DPS just kind of using abilities for no reason. And a lot of the times, there is two reasons that people are using these abilities poorly. Number one is they take some pressure and they just kind of dump abilities in response to any sort of pressure. You know, like a Loki takes a tiny bit of damage and he pops his totem. And same thing with Adam's soul bond. And the thing that you can do to stop doing that, wasting abilities when under a little bit of pressure, is I want you to start to limit test your abilities a bit more and really get a grasp of when you're gonna die for no reason and when you're not. Like, oftentimes this comes from the fact that you're scared that you're gonna just get killed and picked out of nowhere, and you're just making sure that if you press it right now, you're guaranteed to be safe. But the reality of it is you're actually setting yourself up to die very soon after your abilities wear out, right? So you're saving this moment, but it's really just a band-aid fix to a problem that is going to keep coming after you over and over again. So learning how to be more calm under that set of pressure, I think is really important. That's one of the reasons why I think the free-for-all mode, where you're actually just running around and fighting enemies, this is actually a really good, useful mode to learn how to be calm under pressure and use your abilities under pressure. I think it's actually really useful. The other way that people are wasting their abilities is they are just kind of feeling like they need to do something. They're like feeling like they need to get value somewhere. They need to use this ability. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but I want you to identify when you're okay, like when things are fine, like when the fight has not started or when you don't need to do anything. Like, it's okay to not constantly be active. I think that it's important to understand in a hero shooter, it's not about constantly having really high uptime. It's about the moments that you perform when things happen. So you don't want to just like dump abilities all the time because you need them for specific moments. It's not about always being active, always being proactive, always making things happen. You need abilities to respond to certain things, and you want abilities for certain moments, so it's okay to just like not use an ability for a little while. Another really important thing about silver is you need to ignore the meta. I know that I personally make a lot of tier lists, and I know a lot of people make tier lists. A lot of that is for fun. It's interesting to learn about the meta, but I'm gonna be honest with you, no meta tier list has anything to do with silver. They don't have anything to do with each other at all. And the thing is, a lot of the reasons that you complain about things that happen in silver, your teammates in silver, that's directly why the meta would not matter in silver. Like last meta, the meta was Bucky Groot in pro play because a Bucky would hook someone in and a Groot would wall them off. How are you going to get that level of coordination in a silver lobby? You're not even getting two people doing the basic things together 99% of the time, and you know that personally. So metas don't really matter. Mechanical skill also greatly impacts how good certain characters are. Characters like Hela are going to be way broken or really unplayable depending on your mechanical skill. So anyways, anything can work. Please ignore the meta. Don't get overly, obsessed with the meta to the point where you're not playing what you want to play or getting good at what you want to get good at, because that's the only way that you're truly going to climb in the long term is by actually playing what you enjoy and having fun while you grind. Now, the next rank is gold, and I think there's a lot of problems problems in gold. A lot of players have similar problems in gold. And the first one that I have to constantly bring up because it's so important is stats. Over harping on stats. I can't tell you how many times on stream people ask me, I have this much heals, is that good? Or I have this percentage accuracy, is that good? Or they say stuff like, I had this amount of heals, I had 20,000 heals and we lost. Oh my god, I did so much. Here's the thing. These stats are completely arbitrary, they're completely irrelevant, and it doesn't help you to focus on them. And I'm gonna tell you why. Stats don't mean you played well. In fact, stats could mean that you played poorly, and it doesn't actually tell the full story. Let me talk about accuracy stats, right? If I have really low accuracy stats relative to someone else, you could say, hey, they're actually better at aim than me. But what if they spent the whole time shooting at a Hulk, shooting at a Groot, and I spent the whole time shooting at an enemy hella, and I killed them a consistent amount of times, and I ended up getting a lot of final blows and actually carrying the game. So while they have a higher accuracy, who actually had better aim? Who had more impactful aim? Let's talk about heals. Let's say you have, 10,000 more heals than someone else, but that person helped make plays, helped create advantages for their team. It was an invisible woman that constantly shielded one of their flyers and pulled the enemy DPS out of position and had really perfectly timed ultimates, and they never double ulted. That person carried far more than you having 10k more healing. So I want to make this clear. It doesn't mean that you didn't play well, but what it does mean is that these stats don't paint the picture. And if you're over harping on them for your development and to tell you that you played well or use it as a justification that you shouldn't have lost or whatever, you're thinking about the wrong things. Like, no stats matter if they don't end up in a win or help you get a win. And this is ultimately the most important point, because win rate is what you should be focusing on, ultimately trying to get that dub. Now, another thing that in gold I see a lot is players are trying to be very, very flexible. They're overly flexible. I really want you to focus on mastery of a few heroes. Most of all, like, I do understand you want a great comp. You want like two tanks, 2 supports, whatever. But if you have certain characters that you really want to grind, you really want to get good at, I would encourage you to at least try to make them work. Walk out of spawn with them, maybe fight with them one time. If you have to swap, you have to swap. Just don't make it easy to swap. Because what happens is that if you always swap, like if you always swap off the character you want to play, you'll eventually never play them. And then you'll just like always be filling. And then you'll be salty about filling all the time and you'll be angry. I really want you to enjoy the grind and play characters that you actually want to get good with. And have reliable characters in several roles, not just one role. But don't, learn the entire cast, right? You don't want to have 10 heroes in your hero pool because you're really going to be lukewarm at all of them. One of the things I like to say is, like, let's say you play 10 hours a week and then you play 5 heroes divided equally. You're playing 2 hours a week on every hero, and then there's so many different maps, so you're not getting a lot of repetition, right? You ideally want to have repetition on every character on every map, and then against a lot of variety of characters, because every time you play a character against another character on a certain map, you're learning, right? You're adapting, you're taking in the information, you're finding good positions to play. And if you're constantly swapping, you're just not doing these things, and that's how your skills can stagnate. Now, there's one last thing in gold that I would say you should focus on, and it's an easy one to do to build more consistency into your impact, and that's finding consistent value with your ultimates. I think a lot of people want to VOD review and look at their games, but they don't really know how to improve. Like, what are they supposed to focus on? I would highly recommend doing a VOD review when you can and just looking at your ults. How are you ulting and what times are you ulting? Like, what was this deciding factor? It's really easy if you look at an ult, you think, why did I decide to ult here? Was the ult necessary? Were there things that stopped my ult? Did I or did I not get value, and why? These are really simple questions you can ask yourself. But if you just ulted and I ask you, why did you ult? And you say, I don't know. And I say, did they have defensive ults? And you say, I don't know. This is really bad, right? You're coming up with no reasoning. And if you don't base your decision making with your most powerful ability, which are your ultimates, after something that is like fundamental decision making, then you're doing things purely based on intuition. And here's the thing. If your intuition was top tier, you would be a top tier player. My intuition is not top tier either. I have to base my decisions based on information and logic, not intuition. Like, there are a handful of people in the world that have crazy intuition and they can just go off of it and be a top tier player. That's not me. That's not you. We need to base our plays based on logic and reasoning. So even if your logic and reasoning was wrong about why you should use your ultimate. Maybe you thought, hey, they don't have a defensive ult, I'm gonna ult here because they're on the back foot, and then you pop your ult and it doesn't work out. I would rather that, because then we can work on that and figure out how to make better decisions than doing things for no reason or just purely off of intuition. Working off of intuition is the wrong thing to do because once again, our intuition is not good, and that's what we need to work on. That's how we get better. Now we move on up to the Wild West and Plat. And I said this before, but it's an important point about Plat. Plat is the ultimate mixed rank of all kinds of different players. We have great aimers, we have great gamers at other games, we have people new to hero shooters, but they're talented in other games. It's kind of a huge mixed bag. Some people will really understand the meta and they'll understand complicated interactions. Some people will just be mechanical gods. And it's just like a mixed bag of random things. So how do you succeed in this environment? And I really do think that it all comes down to the hero shooter fundamentals. Really, Plat is where I think the hero shooter aspect of Rivals really kind of shines through more than anything else. And what are these ultimate hero shooter fundamentals that you need to learn? First one is effective range, which allows you to make fights easier. So every single character is going to have a range where they're most effective. This is the sweet spot where you want to fight enemies in that effective range, right? So like Magneto has a very particular range, and then anything closer in range to that, he could be pretty effective in, but anything further than that, not so much. Black Widow has a really far effective range, and she ideally wants to maximize that range, and different characters have different effective ranges. But you need to not only understand your character's effective range, but also the effective range of characters that you're trying to fight. Because if you can create a situation where your hero is effective in a range that the enemy hero is not, that's how you can make fights easier. So as an example, oftentimes the fight between Magneto and the Thing, right, is the Magneto is trying to maximize his range and try to keep him at the furthest distance that he's effective, and the Thing is trying to close in the gap and get really close to the Mag. So the Mag is never trying to close in that gap. He's trying to force the Thing to use his cooldowns and his movement to close in that gap for you. So Magneto's always going to back up and keep distance and keep distance and keep distancing, and the Thing is going to be trying to close in that distance, and that's kind of the song and dance that they go for. But if you're as Magneto pushing into aggressively playing into the effective range of the Thing, you're doing half of his job for him, or most of his job for him, and then that Thing gets to swing into you without ever investing, you know, his charge in to close in that gap, and he can use it in a lot more dynamic ways to pivot in or pivot out, and that gives him more power. So understanding that there are ways to create advantages for you based on knowing the differences in the ranges. And another example of this on the other end is like, let's say you're playing Bucky up against a Black Widow. You cannot fight that Black Widow in far ranges because you're not very effective in those ranges. So you need to be creative. Use terrain, use cover, close in the gap. Try to fight that person from mid or close range where the fight is a lot more even, where you actually have a chance to trade blows. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure. This is a core hero shooter concept. Another thing that's really core to hero shooters is the idea of pushing and pulling. So in general, when your team has an advantage, you should be pushing in more aggressively, and when your team is at a disadvantage, you should be pulling back and giving space to the enemy team. What this does is that when you have an advantage, you're trying to roll over the enemy team and force a fight with that advantage. And when you have a disadvantage, you're trying to back up and give way for the enemy to take space without crushing you. So one of the best ways, the best examples I give here is like Agario. So Agario is the idea where there's a whole bunch of bubbles that people control, and if the bigger bubble walks into the smaller bubble, it absorbs that bubble and becomes massive. And if you're the smaller bubble, you need to avoid all the bubbles bigger than you, and you need to eat the bubbles smaller than you, right? This is a fun game, but it also directly actually correlates with this concept where if your bubble is smaller, you do not want the fight to be forced. So if I'm playing with 6 people and 2 people die, and the enemy team has 6 now, so it's 6v4, I do not want to allow the enemy team to walk into me, because if they walk into me, if their tanks walk in, if their DPS walk in, if their team walks in, the bigger force, the more powerful force with more HP and more cooldowns and more damage will destroy us, right? So they want to push in and close us out. That's the pushing. That's what they're trying to do. And we're trying to back up so that we don't get crushed, right? So we're pulling. And what that does is as we're giving space, if at any point some of them get overeager, maybe a DPS gets overeager trying to push us out, or a tank, and that one person pushes into us to the point where they isolate themselves, right? Because they're going ahead of the pack. They're not on the same page with their random teammates. Now they're isolating themselves into our group of 4. and now it's a 4v1. Guess what? We're the bigger bubble, so we eat that one person. And now it's a 4v5. It's not as big anymore. And now we don't have to back up nearly as much. And maybe someone else messes up. And now it's a 4v4. And guess what? Now it's even. Now we don't have to back up anymore. Now we can actually poke and prod and fight each other in the neutral. And maybe we can even kill somebody and then push in and then turn that fight. But this is a big, important concept because so many players want to push when they should be pulling. So many players don't push when they should be pushing. And the only way that you can do this properly is by constantly taking note of what your team is doing and constantly taking note of who is advantaged in a fight. Is it the enemy team? Is it your team? Who's alive? Who's dead? Always have an eye glued to the top right. The better you get used to this, the better you'll be as a player because you really need to know who's alive and who's dead on both sides of the battlefield. Now, positioning is a big one, and I have an advanced positioning guide. I actually have two that you should definitely check out because positioning is a really complicated concept, but the core fundamental I'll give you is that good positioning gives you options to chase, options to run. The more options a piece of positioning gives you, the better that positioning is. It's an oversimplification. I would highly recommend you check out those videos. Last up is mechanical practice. If you are not warming up mechanically, then you should. Every single person should be having a small but concise warm-up routine that makes it so that you can play near your, normal capacity for aim. I know a lot of people that they jump right into ranked and they're not mechanically warmed up and they throw the first 1 or 2 games of the day. And that could be the difference between a 60% win rate and a 40% win rate for the day. So warm up, focus on your mechanics. And of course, we have aim guides coming soon on this channel. So smash that like and subscribe so you don't miss out on those. Now we roll on over to the diamond rank. And there's a couple of core things that you need to learn in diamond if you really want to make it past diamond to grandmaster. Number 1 is learning counters and matchups. We did talk about effective range, which is part of this, but I think this is a little bit deeper than that, where you're really learning how to be effective against the people that you dominate. You should identify them, all right? Like if you're a certain character and you have really, really positive matchups against some characters, learning how to feast on those characters a lot is important, and also learning how to be effective against the things that shut you down. I think it's really important that you don't just fall over to whatever counters you. You don't see a counter to your character and fold. Understand how to still get value. How are you supposed to play the matchup? What are you supposed to do differently now that there's a Namor against your Black Panther? Or what are you supposed to do differently now that there's a Hawkeye against your Hela? Or now that there is a Diver against your Luna? Or there's an Emma against your Cap? Like, how do you play different and still be effective? What can you do? And there's a limit to what you can do against multiple things. I think everything can be played around to an extent when there's 6 players on both sides of the battlefield, whether you're ignoring them, focusing on what you can focus on, whether you're, diving their backline because you can't touch their flyer. There's always ways to adapt. But also, if the enemy is hard stacked against you, you need to know, okay, I can actually swap here and get value in a really easy, seamless way. And learning characters that are good against what shuts you down is also a way to be consistently effective. And I think very smart to just expand your hero pool in a way that, like, if they're going to go hard counter against you, you can play this other character that just doesn't get countered by any of those things at all. That being said, you still need to make it difficult for people to force you off your main. If you're always running to a different character when you're just countered by the smallest thing, then you're never going to really push your heroes to their limits or to the next rank's limits, which is where you really want to go to. Another thing that I think is important once you're in Diamond is to learn the meta. And I know that before I said you can ignore the meta, you can climb to the highest elos with anything. And this is still true. You could still climb to the highest elos, all the way to top 500 with any hero in the game, but that doesn't mean that you can ignore the meta. I think it's really important that you understand what people are playing, what strategies are good, what's being effective, and how people are playing, not only for just bans, but also to know how what you're gonna do lines up against that. Like, I'm not saying be a slave to the meta, but I am saying understand how your hero lines up against the meta heroes, and what is your game plan against everything that is played in the meta, because you're gonna play against them a lot. Like right now, let's say you're a Magic main, Psylocke is really good. If you don't know what your matchup is against Psylocke, how you're supposed to play against her, whether you ignore or fight her or duel her or whatever, then you don't really have a good idea about how you should be playing from game to game. Knowing how you're going to fight against Emma, how you're going to fight against Psylocke, how you're going to fight against Mag, How are you going to fight against backline supports? What is your plan against what support? I think all these things are really important things that you can ask yourself and build a game plan around so that you're effective into the meta, even if you're not playing the meta. The last up, I did mention it, but Diamond is a place where you really need to grow mechanically. Once you get to this point, while I think mechanics were something that you could more or less ignore and still succeed, it's not that case anymore. If you have bad mechanics past this point, it's gonna hold you back from being effective. Because one of the things about mechanical skill you need to understand is that it impacts everything. Like if you're creating a good play on paper with your game sense and your positioning, but your mechanics are just not cutting it, you could fail a game plan, or you could fail a whole play because your mechanics failed you. Because all mechanics are is consistent action, the ability to replicate a consistent action and be reliable in that action. So that means growing your mechanics, and there's a lot of different ways to do that depending on your hero. Whether that means having a consistent routine, whether that means doing something like aim labs, optimizing your equipment, or I'm gonna, like I said, post an advanced aim guide on this channel that you can check out. There's a lot of ways to further develop your aim, and while having great aim could have carried you to this point, and now you have to learn other stuff, I think it also could hold you back from this point on if you learned all the other stuff but don't have good mechanics or haven't developed your mechanical skill. The next up is Grandmaster, and in Grandmaster there's a lot of things that you're being taxed on. First off, you need to perform above and beyond. Oftentimes a Grandmaster player cannot just be a passive player that lets the game go by, where you're not making a lot of mistakes but you're not making plays either. I want you to make mid-fight plays. I want you to really try to create an advantage for your team. One of the things I say is that you can create an advantage for your team with the right mechanics and the right understanding of the game from every role. So let me take you through this example. Let's say that there is a diving Black Panther on your team. Now, you as a Magneto, you could bubble the support that's Dove. You could right-click stun the Black Panther and potentially create a kill on that Black Panther, or at the very least stop his play. All with your mechanics, scouting, and understanding. As the Luna, you could have froze the Black Panther, potentially lining up a kill and just carrying that fight with your mechanical skill. And as a Hela, you could, stun him and tap him, or make a flank play on their supports and tap them. Like, mechanical skill and understanding combined with reasonable positioning can create tons of mid-fight and pre-fight plays that can carry. And also, it allows you to create playmaking that you wouldn't just be able to do without being able to rely on that level of mechanical skill. So I think in Grandmaster, the focus on being able to do these plays and execute them well, hit that Magneto ultimate, make sure that you make that play that is a risky play, but it actually pays off for you because you have reliable mechanics and you have a good understanding of your limits or the limits of your character. Another thing that's really important in Grandmaster is to shut down problematic players. There's going to be some players that you run across that are obviously hard carrying the lobby. Maybe it's just that lobby, or maybe they're just an insane player, but they are having a game and they are making the entire game about them. What can you individually do to mess up that player? How can you take that player out of the game, make them ineffective, or just simply make sure that you're not the liability that is getting farmed by them? Whether that's a hard carry DPS player, support, tank, whoever it is, understand that they are getting value. Identify that is the person that's carrying, because sometimes it's not the most obvious thing. And then find ways to give that player a harder time. Not allow that person to just coast. And sometimes a player that dominates the first half of a game kind of fades into the background in the second half of the game. It happens all the time. I'm sure you have had games where you started off insane, and by the end of the game, you're feeding, you're making mistakes, things aren't going right, you start swapping to different characters. This is what you want to do. You want to create uncomfortability. Don't allow a player to just sit in the pocket and do everything they want the whole game. If you can't identify these problematic players and create game plans to shut them down, then you're not going to be able to advance past Grandmaster. Now, a super important one in Grandmaster is to stop being a liability on fill. This is something that happens when you're in a relatively high elo. Most players play to win, so most players are going to fill a good amount of the time, or some amount of the time at least, and this is the kind of requirements to climb past Grandmaster. When you get to play the characters that you main, you need to carry on those characters. You need to dominate, you need to deadlift, you need to be insane, and you still need to be a solid role player on fill. Nothing else will do. Like, if you are filling and you're not playing particularly well, then you're actually a liability on that fill, because they're going to be carry DPS and carry tanks and carry even supports that are going to make, you know, short work of you. You're going to be the obvious hole in the composition. When you miss time abilities, you miss time the needs of your team, you miss time plays, and you're not carrying. And here's the thing. I'm going to tell you right now, don't fill on characters that you just can't play well. And if you can't play a character well enough to make them your fill, then you need to grind that character and get better at that character, maybe even grinding an ult, so that you can build those characters and actually play those characters at a reasonable level. Because if you are carrying on your main and you have a 5% win rate on your main, but every time you fill, which is like half the time, you're playing characters you can't really play very well, and you're throwing the majority of your games, and you have a 35% win rate on those, then your win rate's gonna balance out and maybe even be negative. So it's really, really important that you make sure that you are still stepping up even on the roles or the fills that you're playing. Because here's the thing, just because you're filling doesn't mean you're owed a win. You still have to work hard for that win. You still have to perform better for that win. And it's really important that you understand that. And last up, the thing that holds the most people back from this rank, or, you know, anywhere around that top 3% to top 1%, is ego. Players get held back because of ego. Just because you've climbed tier and you're better than a lot of people doesn't mean there isn't more for you to go, more space for you to go. And here's the reality. Going from here to becoming a top 100 player is harder than going from, you know, bronze all the way here. It's very difficult to advance past this, but everyone's dedicated, everyone's grinding, everyone's focusing on self-betterment. Everyone has good peripherals and good equipment and all those things that, you know, other people just don't do, all the little things that kind of set them apart. Everyone has that here. So if you allow ego to consume you, then you're going to be stuck in a rut, because ultimately what ego is that you're good enough. You don't need to improve. You don't hold yourself to a high standard. But if you do have an ego, I want the ego to exist in the game itself. Like you're the best player in the world and you're going to perform and you're going to do everything you can, and it's expected of you to do it. Not of your team to do it, but of you. And then when you leave the game, when you're out of the lobby, when you're out of the game, now you understand, okay, I need some work. There's some things I messed up. But it's okay to have that ego because it's partially confidence. Just don't let it consume you and allow it to turn into toxicity or allow it to turn outward. Because if it's turning outward, if you're going to complain about your teammates, then your ego's not strong enough. You didn't do enough to carry them. Like, who cares how good they are or bad they are? It has to do with you and your self-betterment. And if you can't think about it that way, then your ego isn't really strong enough to have an ego at all. Now, last up is Celestial / top 500. Right now, most of Celestial's in top 500 and then top 500 rank. And here's the thing about top 500. At this point, everyone has top tier of mostly everything: mechanics, game sense, positioning. And I'll say that at the highest level, it's more about the mistakes you make, not necessarily the good plays you make. Like, you're trying to minimize your mistakes to the smallest amount and play as close to perfection as possible. And another thing that you should know is that Marvel Rivals Ignite just got announced, and across 4 different regions, there's going to be $3 million in prize pools for tournaments in Marvel Rivals. Like, this is a huge announcement, and this means this is the start for the Rivals pro scene for the foreseeable future. And that's a crazy amount of money, just a giant amount of money that is going to kickstart the pro scene. And when you're at this level, you should be joining a team, you should be grinding hard, because you're here, you're actually closer to becoming a pro than anyone else, and you're very capable of, you know, entering in this new world of pro grinding. So, you know, VOD review, consistency, analysis, routine, and even trying out and joining scrim teams. If you want me to do another video about what you should do to go pro in Rivals, I can also make that. I can definitely break that down for you. But I think this breaks down everything I would give you, all my advice for every single rank in Season 2. If you enjoyed the content, please smash that like, subscribe. 30 days of free coaching. Check it out right now in the Rivals Academy. And subscribe so you don't miss out on my aim guide and a lot of other guides coming soon. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.